Jennifer Hawke first met Dr. William Pettit Jr. at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh when William was a third-year medical student and she was working as an oncology nurse. The two began seeing each other, they fell in love, and they were married in 1985. They settled down, intending to start a family, so they bought a home in Cheshire, Connecticut. Cheshire is a smaller community with approximately 29,000 residents. It was known as a really safe place for families to live. It had a lower crime rate than other cities of a comparable size. And just as intended, Jennifer and William started a family. They welcomed their oldest daughter, Haley, in 1989, followed by another daughter, Michaela, in 1995. Both Jennifer and William took great interest in raising their daughters. They surrounded them with a stable home life filled with love. William worked as an endocrinologist in Plainville, and he also served as Joslin Diabetes Center's medical director at Connecticut Central Hospital. After having her two children, Jennifer started work at a private boarding school, Cheshire Academy, as a school nurse. She was popular with the students as well as her co-workers, and it was a much slower, more enjoyable pace of life. She was a respected and beloved member of staff, as well as a dedicated churchgoer and a lover of music who played the guitar and the piano. The happy Pettit family filled their home with love and support for one another, and the whole family was loved throughout the community. Jennifer, who unfortunately at this time lived with multiple sclerosis, was deeply loved by her children and husband. After the diagnosis, the family rallied around her. They gave her unconditional support in her fight against MS. William sometimes slept on a couch downstairs so that he wouldn't disturb his wife's sleep since he went to bed later than she did. Daughter Haley started a fundraising team named Haley's Hope to raise money for multiple sclerosis research. She had just graduated from high school and was planning to go to Dartmouth College. There she planned on following in her mother and father's footsteps, as she was due to study medicine. Her sister Michaela was looking forward to taking over Haley's fundraising team and changing the name of it to Michaela's Miracle. Both girls are accomplished students who earned good grades in school, and they were active members of the student body. Michaela loved to cook and often made meals for her family to enjoy. The Pettit family really did seem like a blueprint for the American middle class. They were successful, loving, and very loved. On July the 22nd, 2007, the summer before Haley was going to head to Dartmouth, Michaela had decided to make dinner for her family once again. To grab the ingredients that Michaela would need, she and Mother Jennifer went to a local store before then returning home. While they were at the store, the mother and daughter drew the attention of a man named Joshua Komizajewski. He was 26 years old and had a lengthy criminal history. After taking an interest in young Michaela, Komizajewski followed the mother and daughter home to see where they lived. Unlike the Pettit children, Komizajewski didn't show any potential for a productive life. He had been adopted when he was young, and in the 1990s, he allegedly repeatedly violated his own sister. In 1995, he torched a vacant Cheshire gas station, burning it to the ground. There were many indications that Komizajewski was a troubled young man, someone who enjoyed wielding power over other people, and someone that had a blatant disregard for other people's well-being and property. He began using hard illicit substances in his teenage years, and he had spent years in prison for his habit of committing nighttime burglaries. The young career criminal was paroled in April of 2007. This was just 3 months before he spotted Michaela in the grocery store. Komizajewski was in touch with another career criminal, Stephen Hayes. He was a man very much interested in making money in any way that he could. The two men had met at a halfway house, and like Komizajewski, Hayes had a long criminal history that first started when he was a teenager. Hayes also displayed violence and a disregard for other people. He allegedly violated his two younger brothers when they were little. He had a series of charges on his record, including burglary, possession, forgery, and larceny. Up to this point in his life, Hayes had been arrested almost 30 times. He showed no signs that he wanted to live any other kind of life. He too had served multiple prison sentences, and he had only been released from prison in 2006 when he was let go after serving only 3 years of a 5-year sentence for burglary. On that occasion, he used a rock to break a car window and steal from the vehicle. Komisarjevsky allegedly told Hayes about the young girl and woman, the mother and daughter that he had seen, and how he followed them to their nice home. The two men, who both liked to steal things that didn't belong to them, planned a burglary in which they thought they could make a lot of money. And after some planning, that is exactly what they did. They broke into the Pettit home in the early morning hours of July the 23rd, 2007. They knew at that time the family would be asleep. Komisarjevsky entered the house by going through an unlocked door in the basement, and whilst there, he grabbed a baseball bat that was sat next to the stairs. As they moved through the house, the two criminals spotted William. This particular night was one of those nights where William slept on the couch in the sunroom. Komisarjevsky struck William with the bat, hitting him several times, and this caused significant blood loss because William was on blood thinners for prior heart issues. They then used rope and zip ties to bind his ankles and wrists, and put a covering over his face. The concern he must have been feeling for the rest of his family must have been unbearable. The two criminals then went up to Jennifer's room and tied her up. And after this, they did the same to both Michaela and Haley. Pillowcases were placed over their heads so they couldn't see, a terrifying and disorientating experience. After the entire family was bound and living in fear of what might happen next, the criminals looked through the house for cash. They then brought an injured William down to the basement, tying him to a support post. They continued looking through the house for money, but they were unhappy with what they were finding. During their search, they discovered the couple had thousands of dollars in a bank account, so they came to the decision that they would take $15,000 from that. Hayes then left the house to go to a nearby gas station, and he filled up 2 cans with gasoline, and then he brought those containers back to the Pettit house. When he returned, he took Jennifer to the bank. He made her withdraw $15,000 from a line of credit as soon as the bank opened. And whilst there, heroically, Jennifer managed to write a note. This was meant to alert the bank that her and her family were being held against their will, tied up in their home by 2 men. To convince the bank teller that she was serious, she showed her a picture of her 2 daughters in her wallet. Jennifer's worry for Haley and Michaela was evident. The employees in the bank believed that her story was true. Immediately, the bank personnel called 911 and told police about the incident. They did this whilst Jennifer was still stood there waiting. This is that real 911 call.
We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says that her husband and children are being held at their house. The people are in a car outside the bank. She is getting $15,000 to bring out to them, that if the police are told, they will kill the children and the husband.
Jennifer allegedly said that she thought the criminals were only interested in the family's money. After receiving the report from the bank, Cheshire police went to check out the situation by stationing themselves around the Pettit house. They did this without using lights or sirens, so as not to alert the criminals to their presence. The police didn't know, however, that the crimes against the family had intensified. Komisarjevsky disgustingly violated Michaela. He took pictures of the attack on his cell phone. Hayes then began doing the same to Jennifer. William, who wasn't aware of what was happening to his family, and who had by this time been badly injured, tried desperately to escape. Whilst Hayes was attacking Jennifer, Komisarjevsky noticed that William was no longer where they'd left him, so he then went to share this information with Hayes. Hayes then throttled Jennifer, and the 2 men poured gasoline on her body. They then walked to the girls' bedrooms and poured gasoline on them as well. This was all with the intention of destroying any evidence that could link them to the crime. The criminals then started a fire. They ran from the house and drove off in the Pettit family's car. Haley, who was 17 years old, managed to break through her restraints. She valiantly escaped her bedroom, but then she collapsed in the hallway, sadly passing from smoke inhalation. Sister Michaela also passed from smoke inhalation and was found still tied to the bed. Both daughters had succumbed to the fire. As the two men were dousing the home with gasoline and lighting the fire, William somehow managed to crawl to a neighbour's home for help. At first, the neighbour didn't even recognise William. The beating he had suffered had been that severe.
The neighbor called 911.
I got Bill Pettit here who's hurt, my neighbor.
He's at your house?
Yes, he's right here.
Komisarjevsky and Hayes didn't get far after fleeing from the house. Police spotted them almost straight away because of the surveillance they had set up. They chased after the men and arrested them just 1 block away from the home. The home invasion had lasted 7 hours, and it had cost the lives of 3 innocent people, leaving behind an unbelievably heartbroken William, who was obviously devastated by the loss of his entire family. Although there was no question of the men's guilt, because they were caught fleeing the house and forensic evidence tied them to the scene, they still had to go through trials for their crimes. Komisarjevsky and Hayes faced 17 counts of various charges, all for the crimes they committed against the Pettit family. During Hayes' trial, his attorneys tried to paint Komisarjevsky as the villain. They said that he was the one who came up with the idea for the home invasion, as well as for escalating the situation which ended in the violations and the murders. The prosecutors, however, painted a compelling picture that both men were to blame for what happened on that night. On October 5th, 2010, the jury found that Hayes was guilty of 16 out of the 17 charges that he faced.
On the steps of a Connecticut courthouse, Dr. William Pettit emerges stoic but relieved.
We did our best to keep our faith in God that justice would be served.
A guilty verdict for Stephen Hayes.
Komisarjevsky's trial didn't begin until 2011, and he followed the same argument that Hayes' attorneys had tried during his trial. They tried to say that Hayes was the ringleader, and that Komisarjevsky didn't plan on murdering anyone. On October 13th of that year, he was found guilty of all 17 of the charges against him. Many people hoped that the two men would receive the death penalty for such a vicious, heartbreaking crime that ended 3 promising lives, destroyed a family, and traumatized people throughout the town and the country. During the sentencing recommendation portion of the trial, the jury had to decide if they would recommend a death penalty or life in prison. Hayes' defense attorney suggested to the jury that it would be a stiffer punishment to sentence Hayes to life in prison rather than the death penalty. The attorney argued that Hayes was so disturbed by his own crimes that he would rather die than live for decades in prison with the memory of what he had done. Because of the horrific nature of the crimes, the jury did vote in favour of the death penalty for Hayes on November 8th, 2010, and for Komisarjevsky on December 9th, 2011. At Hayes' official sentencing hearing on December 2nd, 2010, he was sentenced by the judge handling his case to the death penalty. On December 9th, 2011, the jury also recommended that Komisarjevsky be subjected to the death penalty, and the judge in this case ruled that he would die by lethal injection. Before the death penalty could be carried out in either case, however, the state of Connecticut decided in 2015 to abolish capital punishment penalties. This meant that anyone wanting to see the ultimate punishment in this case would now be in for a major disappointment. As the sole survivor of the crime that took the lives of his family, William was critical of the decision to eliminate the death penalty in Connecticut. Nevertheless, both men had their sentences converted to life sentences. Since then, Komisarjevsky has filed an appeal based on several factors, losing each one. Doing this, he has infuriated local officials who claim it was a waste of funds to have to fight these appeals. Father William, who later remarried and had another child with his new wife, wanted to do something to preserve the memory of his late wife and their 2 daughters. In 2007, he started the Pettit Family Foundation, a charity that provides scholarships for students and that helps families whose lives are impacted by violence. William's resolve to rebuild and start a new life is quite incredible, but we can be sure that he'll be haunted for the rest of his days.